Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing nonfiction books that changed my life. And what I mean by that is that these are books that had a lasting impact on me in one way or another. They either changed the way I looked at something, they changed the way I did something. Okay, if you have watched my channel before, you've probably heard me talk about this book because I rave about it. This is like a book I feel like everybody should read because it's impactful for anybody. Like there's really nobody I would think that wouldn't benefit from this in one way or another, and that is Rest by Alex Soojung Kim. I love this book. I have read this book 3 times in the last like year and a half, and I will continue to read this like every year indefinitely because it is so amazing. Basically, this talks about work-life balance, but instead of a lot of books and podcasts and YouTube videos and stuff that focus on work-life balance, but they focus on the work aspect and the productivity aspect, this book specifically focuses on how successful and productive and happy people rest. And especially it talks about active rest, which is the idea that instead of passive rest, which is like sitting in front of the TV, like kind of passively just sitting there and like resting, watching the TV, there's a lot of great ways to rest your mind, your body that are still active, like learning, a new skill, like trying out a new recipe if you like to cook or bake, or even going on a walk. Like there's a whole chapter on walks and the health and mental benefits they provide us with and how that actually can be very restful. This is a fascinating book. It changed the entire way that I approach rest because for the longest time I viewed rest as I have to be sitting still. And for someone like myself who's a bit on the hyperactive side, that was not a pleasant idea. Like the only thing I sit still for really is when I'm like working at my computer, when I'm reading, and when I'm sleeping. Like for the most part, otherwise I'm constantly kind of moving around. I'm a pretty fidgety person. So the idea that I had to like sit there and just passively watch like TV or something really doesn't appeal to me. And how often do you like binge watch something and do you feel amazing afterwards? And again, like I'm not putting down watching TV or anything like that. If you enjoy it, please do it. But this just suggests different ways that we don't traditionally think of as rest that are actually really good for us, that actually have like better like long-term benefits, and just incorporating a few of those can really help you recuperate and inspire more creativity and also just bounce back like even in the middle of your day if you kind of have that afternoon slump like a lot of us do. This book has some really great suggestions. I like that it has a lot of anecdotal like stories and stuff throughout it. However, it also backs it up with a lot of research, and I really enjoy that. There's also a lot of applicable tips in this. So it's not just a book you pick up and you read it and you don't come away with anything that you can do about this topic. So I really like that. Similarly, this is kind of a bonus book, but he also wrote The Distraction Addiction, and this book is a little more technical, I would say. It's definitely like very heavy on the scientific research and stuff, which is really interesting, but it talks about how to live in our very distracted society and just how a lot of the ways that we distract ourselves with technology and the email notification and everything just constantly like pinging and like beeping at us, and oh, you have a text message, and how that's really eating away at like our minds basically. And I love YouTube and, watching TV and like all these things just like anybody else. But this really talks about some ways to intentionally choose to use technology so that you're not letting technology control you, and that you're also using it on your own terms so you're not constantly living in this like distracted, frenzied environment, which is very stressful, not as productive, not as fulfilling, and I find that really interesting. So I would check these books out. My favorite is definitely Rest, but this book is also great. Next, I have 2 books by Gretchen Rubin. So one of them I have checked out from the library, and that is The 4 Tendencies, and basically this book looks at what motivates you. And it does it in a way that I haven't seen done by a lot of other books. I love reading self-help, self-improvement, psychology type books, and this book really breaks down the 4 tendencies, which is the idea that you are motivated by either external or internal motivations and or a combination of both or none. I'll put a little picture on screen of her 4 tendencies. There's like a quiz in it, there's a breakdown of it, and there's a breakdown of each of the types once you figure out which one you are and how you can effectively go after your goals. Like what is ways that you can work with yourself instead of just following kind of blanket advice, like, oh, well, do this if you want to succeed or go after your goals. Like, that's not going to work for everybody. This does it in a more specific way. It really challenges you to look at yourself and how you are motivated. Like, am I motivated? If I say to myself, I'm going to do this, you know, X, Y, and Z, can I do that? Or am I somebody who works better with like an accountability buddy? Am I somebody who works better under like deadlines? Am I somebody who works better like this or that? It's super interesting. It's really well worth the read. It's a pretty short read from what I remember, so it's definitely not a huge time investment, but I think it's definitely worth looking at just to kind of assess how you are personally motivated, and these suggestions for how to improve like your like goal setting and your productivity based on your type is so invaluable. It also really helped me understand how other people are motivated, because I feel like when we're motivated in one way, we kind of think, oh, other people are motivated in the same way. But this book kind of made me look at it and go, oh, you know what, my husband is more motivated like this, or this person is more motivated like this, and it helps me understand how to help them better, like if I'm trying to help them motivate themselves, or how I can be helpful, and just kind of think of it from a different point of view, because it's hard sometimes to put yourself in someone else's shoes if you don't understand where they're coming from. So I found this book very interesting. I think it's fascinating. I think it could be helpful for you if you are married or dating someone, like to kind of maybe see how they are motivated. It could be helpful if you're a family, like if you have a family and you have kids and you want to understand their motivations. If you have a coworkers or a team that you manage, something like that. This is just such an interesting book, whether you're just reading it for yourself or to also look at how others are motivated around you. It's fascinating. The other book I really love from her is The Happiness Project. And over the course of a year, Gretchen is trying out all of these popular self-help tips, and some of these are ones that are like scientifically backed up. Some are just like popular advice and pop culture, or just like among the productivity gurus or whatever of the world. So she tries it out herself for a year and does research into it to see if it's backed up by anything, and just see how it personally works for her or doesn't. And if you like the 4 tendencies, she does mention that a bit herself and what type she is in this, so it's very interesting to see that applied in her everyday life. I like this because the memoir style makes it really digestible, very interesting. You're following along a storyline, but you're also getting helpful insight and advice into a bunch of different popular self-help tips and whether or not there's really something there. And I find that very interesting. And this book, as the name suggests, The Happiness Project, it's all about trying to have more fun with your life, trying to be happier and just live the best life you can. It's a really interesting book. I find it really enjoyable. I gotta reread this soon. I haven't read it in a while and I just remember loving it. So speaking of memoir style writing and like something that's really influenced me, this book is fascinating. I read this during college actually for a class and I loved it. It's called Writing is My Drink, a writer's story of finding her voice and a guide to how you can too, and it's by Theo, Pauline, and Nestor. And this book is fascinating. So she's written a number of different books, including some other memoirs. She's also been published in the New York Times, the Huffington Post, a bunch of other places. And I read this for a class, and even if you are someone who's not a writer like myself, if you are just somebody who's wanting to find their own creative voice and just inspire their creativity, or maybe find themselves, like, because you're maybe trying to find like what you want to do with your life, this is a really interesting book. It's very open and honest. The memoir style writing just really pulls you in. She's a really great writer. It's very realistic. It's very raw, I would say. But then at the end of each chapter, she actually has these little sections that she calls like try this, and they're just different sections with prompts. So they're different sections for how to improve your creativity, how to find more out about yourself. So for example, write on this question: what activities make you happy? Do you ever avoid doing those activities, and if so, why? Write about a person who's inspired you to create. Write about something that is mediocre or obviously flawed but you still value. So even if you're not someone who's looking to pursue writing as a career or something like that, this is still just a really interesting book for developing your creative voice, finding out kind of where you want to go in life, finding out what inspires you and motivates you, and it's just a fantastic memoir. It's really engaging, really interesting, so I really recommend that. Another book that I find just fascinating, it's by Cal Newport, and I actually have 2 books by him on this list. He's a fantastic writer. But the first one I read by him was called So Good They Can't Ignore You, and it's Why Skills Trump Passion in the Quest for Work You Love. So I feel like it's really common advice to pursue your passions, you know, like do a job you're passionate about. But in reality, how many people have jobs that they absolutely love and are passionate about? And there's nothing wrong with going after your passion. That's definitely not what I'm saying. You know, I love writing. That's something that's a passion of mine. But at the same time, you got to look for something that you have like skills in and that you can develop skills in effectively. And so this actually goes against that popular advice of just doing something because you're passionate about it. And I love the way he breaks it down. I'm not doing it justice, but so he has 4 different rules he breaks down, including don't follow your passion, be so good they can't ignore you, aka the importance of skill, turn down a promotion, or the importance of control. And then the last one is think small, act big, or the importance of mission. So it's really interesting just because it goes against that common advice about following your passions. It also talks about the danger of following your passion, which is about burnout and just losing something that you love if you really burn out on it. Because while there are some people who can become like full-time artists and really be passionate about it, a lot of people who try to do that also burn out and just lose their passion for it entirely, which is really sad. So it kind of goes into figuring out which one of those people you are and like assessing if you do want to go after a passion. Is it a passion that is better off left as a hobby, or is it a passion that you could sustain as a career without losing the joy of doing it in the first place? I find it really interesting. I like how it talks about developing skills and how even people who are really good and passionate about what they do, a lot of times they become more passionate about what they do as they develop their skill set in it. So it's like the more you develop those skills, the more passionate you become about it. So kind of how skills feed passion, not passion feeds skills. It's a really interesting look. I feel like we're so, at least like my generation, we were really heavily fed the follow your passion, and it's not that there's nothing good about that expression, but this one kind of gives it a more realistic view, and I find it very interesting. I like how it talks about skill sets, developing them, sustaining passion in things. It's really interesting. The other book I love by Cal Newport that I really need to buy in the near future is called Deep Work, and this book absolutely revolutionized the way that I do my freelance writing. I'm going to link a video in my description that's like a 10-minute summary of the book, and it's super fascinating. I'll link it down below if you want to check it out because it explained it very well. But basically, deep work is blocks of time that are uninterrupted, distraction-free, that are just solely dedicated to one task at a time. And these are the very like deep projects. So, you know, for me, like my writing, when I'm editing articles, things like that, you know, if you're an accountant, like when you're crunching numbers, like someone, the deepest kind of work that you do where you're having the highest level of concentration that you really need to devote to that would be your deep work. And it talks about how to set up and manage deep work in your life and how it can save you time in the long run because you're doing this uninterrupted block and you're really getting a lot done in these really short bursts of time. It's hugely fascinating. It gives a lot of applicable advice, whether you're somebody who has a flexible schedule like myself who like works from home, whether you're somebody who works in like a traditional 9 to 5 and you have like, you know, a manager or someone overlooking you. It gives a lot of different advice for different situations, which I think is great. But it goes into that deep work. It talks about how a lot of different people who are very successful have like their own version of deep work and how they kind of enact that and how they protect that time very, very aggressively. Like there's so many people who will wake up very early just to have that block of time uninterrupted, and that's like their most productive time all day long, and they get so much done in it. It's like the most valuable time in your day in terms of that productivity that you're trying to accomplish, whether it's, you know, for work that you're trying to do that for, or like your own creative project or something that you're really passionate about. It's an extremely interesting book. It has so much applicable tips to it, and it's how I've like completely restructured my own days for my work. So it really had a massive impact on me. Couldn't recommend it enough. Another book that I absolutely adore, this is 168 Hours by Laura Vanderkam, and I've read some of her other books and I do like those, but this is the one that hit me the hardest. And basically 168 hours is how many hours we have in a week, 24 times 7, 168 hours. And it's basically looking at productivity within the course of a week versus like kind of the daily nitty gritty like habit trackers that a lot of people do. So instead of having like this tight productivity, like where you have to do this, 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 and this every single day to accomplish your goals. This looks at how to squeeze in your goals throughout the entire week, how to use 168 hours as a whole, and how to really split up things that seem like they would take so much time and split them up in that 168 hours. It's very, very interesting. There's a ton of case studies where she studies different people's routines. There's also a lot of case studies that focus on moms who are also working as like professionals at the same time. So if you're a parent and you feel stretched for time, this is really interesting. Even if you're not a parent like myself, absolutely fascinating. It talks about how to prioritize what you do in your free time, because everybody, like I know, feels starved for time. You know, we always feel like I don't have enough time to do this hobby that I really would love to do. And when we think about it, how much time would you need to dedicate to, say, you know, knitting something that you're really excited to do, or learning a new skill set? Like, say it was only like 2 or 3 hours in a week. That seems like a lot of time, especially if you look at it like 3 hours in one chunk in one day. But if you can break that down and spread it out throughout the week, that's a really manageable goal for most people. And this book kind of shows you how to do that, and how to look at activities that you're doing throughout your week and ask yourself, are these really bettering my life? Are they making me happy? Like, what could I substitute this for that would be even more enjoyable? So it's a really interesting look at time management. It's really absolutely fascinating. I'll leave the link in the description below, but she also has this interesting like free template that you can download where she has 168 hours throughout the entire week, and it's broken into either 15-minute or 30-minute segments depending on the one that you download. I did it in 15-minute segments, and I tracked my hours and my time for several weeks at a time, multiple times, and it was fascinating. And then I would take a highlighter and I would go through and highlight how I was spending time, because for the longest time I felt like I don't have enough time to exercise. Like, it just felt like I never had enough time, and like I was trying to reach this goal of 150 minutes of exercise a week, because I think that's like the American Cardiology Association's like goal for like good heart health and something like that. But that was my goal, and I always felt like that's so much time, how can I fit that in? And then I would look at all these 15-minute chunks where I was just like kind of wasting time, not doing something I enjoyed, just kind of twiddling my thumbs, and I was like, wow, like there's so many chunks of time in here that I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, and it's not productive, it's not going towards my goals, it's not relaxing, like it's not accomplishing anything, whether it's relaxation or work or my like personal goals. And this really transformed how I look at my week and how I plan my week, and it's fascinating. I would really, really recommend this. Last but not least, we have the Multi-Hyphen Life by Emma Gannon. This is work less, create more, and design a life that works for you. And if you are someone like myself who is multi-passionate, so you have maybe, you know, different passions in life you're trying to juggle, whether you have like a full-time job and then you're also trying to juggle doing this on the side, whether you're someone like myself who freelances, who has like multiple clients, or maybe you have like 2 part-time jobs like with different types of like fields entirely. This book talks about how to kind of bring all of those things together, especially now that we live in this age where a lot of people work in like the gig economy. And that's kind of what the idea of the multi-hyphen life is that you used to be able to ask somebody, hey, you know, what do you do for a living? And they might say, oh, I'm an elementary teacher. But now you ask people, and a lot of times they're like, oh, well, I work as a teacher, but I also, you know, teach piano on the side, and I also do this. And it's like that multi-hyphens, like you can't really answer what you do in one easy sentence. At least a lot of people can't. And I find that very interesting. So if you're somebody who is multi-passionate, as she says, if you have like a lot of different things that you're trying to pursue, if you have a job that's like kind of a conglomeration of a lot of different things, or you're working multiple jobs, this kind of talks about how to keep your sanity, how to prioritize even though you have a lot of passions and goals, and how to kind of sort through them without giving any of them up, which is important to me because I don't want to give any of my goals up, but it's how to pursue them without going crazy. So if you have a lot of different ideas, if you have a lot of different passions or different things you're going towards, this is a really interesting book. It's very well thought out, easy to read, very accessible to read, and it's very practical. There's a lot of like practical advice at the end of each chapter, which I like. I like those little summaries where it just gives you, okay, these are the bullet points for what to do, what to act on, suggestions for how to improve this area. It's a really interesting book. I really enjoy this, and it's all about just making a life that you love, whether that is if you have a full-time job but you're also trying to balance your hobbies and your family and like, you know, all these things, whether you're somebody who works in the gig economy or freelances or has multiple jobs and you're trying to balance that, this is just a really great guide for designing a life you love, making sure that you are going after all your goals but also prioritizing them so you're not going crazy in the meantime, because a lot of us have so many ideas for what we want to do, and this just kind of condenses it into a practical approach so that you can go after them without losing your sanity in the process. So I hope this video was helpful. I feel like I've been talking for quite a bit, but I'm really passionate about just constantly trying to improve myself in any way that I can, whether that's professionally, whether that's my work-life balance, whether that's how I approach things, and I found these books to be very impactful for me. They're all books that I have either reread or they're newer books like this one that I haven't reread yet, but I plan on doing so, and that's why I purchased it in the first place. I would strongly recommend all these books, and I would love to hear down below, what are your favorite nonfiction books? Which ones have had the biggest impact on you, and what did they impact in your life? I would love to hear that down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I do post book content every single week on this channel, especially the mystery, historical fiction, thriller, and nonfiction as well genres, and I would love to have you join our little group here. Got a lot of great people. I love talking to all of you, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!